Fucking works, I think. I think. Fucking music's way too loud in my ears. Oh, I wish I could play music during this, but I cannot. Would have been good though. So, again, another stream that's probably just going to be for video on demand. I mean, it's the reality when you have 40 subscribers and record his Instagram, doesn't see anything I post anyways. But yeah, I got some requests in the past for doing kind of some darker edits. I guess that's something I do a lot of. I just have a penchant for dark images, just kind of the way it goes. Tyler, it could be us, man. Just don't know if it's gonna be, man. I don't surf anyways, man. I just take pictures. And I try and fix a broken fucking computer all the time and just bitch about it to anyone who will listen. It's kind of my thing these days. It's a full-time job. Not sure you understand. Next time. Or maybe after November. We'll see. But I'm just gonna say this once. Basically, I don't know if I can actually show. Let's see what's gonna happen if I show my full screen. I'm so bad at this streaming shit. It's gonna work. So this little guy. Well, I guess you can see my cursor now. Maybe not. I don't know. Top right, all these temperature sensors. The gist of it is that I've had all of my my catalog, raw photos, all this shit sitting on an external, well, technically an external drive. It's a configuration of 8 terabytes on a RAID 0 configuration. Using that as an expansion to my just internal drive. It's basically been crashing. So it'll last anywhere from 20 minutes to about 45 minutes, and it'll get to a point where it stops fully rendering images. So I'll go into an image like this, and it'll be blurry the entire time, at which point everything goes to shit. It doesn't respond. I quit the app. It doesn't quit. I have to force quit it. It doesn't start up. It hangs the restart. So I've shipped the drives back. I've migrated everything on and off twice. They bent one of my original drive after they fixed it. So it's just been this whole fucking thing. So I'm monitoring this temperature here. It's these 4 down here that I'm kind of keeping an eye on. This morning I poked around and did a little bit, and it had one issue, but it hasn't been since I've had the temperature sensors up. So if those get above 70, it's going to shut down, which I find really hard to believe that this is actually what's wrong. But in light of it actually working, I figure why the hell not? I'll just do a stream and see what happens. So sorry for the obnoxious long intro. But yeah, dark photos. That's not one of them. So where to begin? I mean, I think there's just different techniques. I can look at some that are already kind of done. I don't think anything's ever done in mine, but talk about different techniques in order to get the look that I'm going for. And it's not always successful. I've got 20 different edits for some of these photos. This is just kind of the ones that I'm happy with at the moment. And that's always changing. But I mean, there's always these darker, kind of moody images, which this doesn't look right at all. Seems like there's ghosting, but there's not. I think, especially when it comes to cinematic style of dark images, I think everyone just goes really blue. And I think that's a pretty safe spot to start. I think there's part of me that wants to bash it, but I can't. I mean, that's cool, cold. Like, there's all this color theory behind color selections, and as you start getting into more of like the curves panel and the color balance, and like dialing in where you want to put the different values. Like, do you want to kind of have these bumps of green through the midtones? For me, I like putting reds in the shadows. I think it balances out the inherently blue. Um, I don't know if it's definitely not a Sony exclusive thing, but just the way that like that kind of offsets it. But then on top of that, you can apply more of a cooler tone, kind of in like a global sense from a more neutral base. So um, it's it's tough because I think I was bitching about this in one of my other streams. Definitely in Capture One is like I don't know the order of operations in terms of like how colors applied. Um, so for me, one of the first steps is just like getting a neutral base to start from. So I mean, if you look at this original image, like it's pretty neutral. Um, I swear to God, these kids are going to be yelling this whole time. I'm going to shake my fist at them. But I mean, I think at first look, in terms of where it starts and where it finishes, like adding blue is kind of the obvious choice. And this is where there's like different ways to approach dark images um, and how you want to treat them. I think having range is important and thinking about kind of what the connotation is of different tonalities. I think that sounds way more lofty than it actually is. But um, yeah, like for this one, like one of the key things you always wanted to not reset that. Oh my God. Kind of nuking contrast is usually step one. I think there's always like too many, like basically like, I guess the equivalent if you shoot video, my understanding of it at least is that if you shoot log, it's more of like a flat profile and there you have more you can work with. I don't know if there's any equivalent of that in photography, but that's more or less where I'm trying to get is more like a neutral base. And the benefit of that is like you can control where the contrast lives. I think it's usually it's pretty uniform in terms of like where the contrast is, but when you start making something maybe leaning into the darkness of it, like you can't see my cursor, but flash that little crosshair. For like the histograms, I mean, you're living in the bottom quarter of the histogram. Um, so you really need to have like control over where the contrast happens. Like, and I think I would argue even now looking back at this, like I think there's still too much contrast in here. Like I tried to preserve some of these details in the shadows just by adding like instances of contrast and maybe pushing and pulling a little bit too much. It's really not that bad, I guess. To me, it just looks off. Um, and it's really about like what's important in the image too. And that's what I don't know. That's one of the things I like about dark images is that you get really reductive and you start focusing on what's important in images versus um, just focusing on like showing everything. And I think that can kind of lack a little focus. At the same time, like I've been so reductive that I've like, I think I posted an image, like it just looks like a black square on my Instagram and it works at like the highest contrast in like a dark room on an iPhone, and like no one else is going to experience that. And how people experience this is a whole different thing, because every screen has different like color profiles, contrast ratios, ambient lighting scenarios are different. Um, I mean, you you're definitely taking a risk by going darker and kind of reducing the contrast. The way I get around this is I test this on just like shitty screens or TVs. Like I have the benefit of just casting it onto my TV. And actually, I use the the Apple TV app a lot. Um, and it just shows me like how it's rendering the colors, and I think it exposes a lot of your um, maybe creative liberties that you've taken. Like I think there's some instances where you'll just start seeing banding where you just don't see it. Like if I'm looking here, I don't see a bunch, but I think this one's actually okay. But there's some, and also back on this one, like these instances of like the kind of low level fog and like the high kind of like this is like dawn, like it is pretty low contrast, and depending on how you start pushing your colors, you can just start like creating all this odd color contrast that shows up in banding. It shows up in all sorts of ways that you don't want it to show up. Like that's why at the same time, like dark images, it's the less you do, the better. Um, because yeah, the moment you're like pushing and pulling more is the moment you're manipulating things more. Um, so I mean, I could rattle on about this. I don't know what's more helpful for me to just like talk, process, or just show like editing photos. I mean, I would still consider this a dark image, but it's not. I think I've taken all the blues out of it. And I mean, it's an easy example of like a sunrise, like, but I don't know. It just shows that there's different ways of doing it, like conveying the feeling of darkness. And I don't know. I always think it's more emotive than bright, sunshiny pictures. Like, there's definitely a mood and feeling to this, but it's not. Um, I don't know. I guess it carries as much as motion as some of the other darker pictures, but to me, like this is probably one of my favorites, but that's just me. I like he posted on Instagram and it's kind of lost, um, but at the end of the day, who gives a shit about Instagram? That's oh, we might see. Oh, we're good. Um, and I think it's kind of understanding what images are made to be pushed darker, and it's not always the ones that were dark. Like this is a bright day, and it just kind of felt like this is really the point of focus, an area where I want people to kind of like, to me that's the most interesting, is the sand blowing across the dunes. So it's like, all right, well, how do I just kind of drive people's attention there? Like, well, you just kind of reduce everything that's non-essential, like doesn't do anything for the image. I think it helps kind of create some contrast to it, and like the negative space again drives you there. But yeah, it's not always the darkest images that make the best ones. um, you try to capture more light up front and then reduce in post? Um, yes. I don't know what you mean by more light. In terms of like having like a neutral kind of um, like an image that feels doesn't feel dark. Oh shit! See, this is the spin wheel up at the top is I don't know. Okay. I mean, I so when I shoot, I always underexpose a little bit just to kind of prevent from highlights, because it's easier to pull things up than it is like once you blow out, you're gone. Um, so that's where even like this original image, it's funny, like I haven't looked at these originals in a while. Like I don't know why I decided to go dark with this. I mean, this is I like how this turned out. It's just I don't know, like the fact that the color temperature of the light is so unique. I mean, I could very easily just make a duplicate of this. Where is it? And I'm already not. I'm going against what I was supposed to be doing here. Not a drug explaining, bruh. Um, I guess yes, more information. So that's actually another topic I could rattle on about for a while in terms of Fuck, I don't have my. Oh, I do have it. Of just like starting with a neutral canvas being the most important, and I think that applies to like a big part of my editing is reducing clarity and structure. I mean, I'm going -13, -15. Um, that's like I'm taking the details out of it that I'm paying so much money for with these tack sharp lenses. Like you can see all the details I'm losing in these rocks. And I think the same goes for light. Like when you start going dark, you're taking that out of it. And I think it's like having a neutral canvas. Um, it just gives you the control where to destroy it and where to kind of keep it intact. Um, you can get into like local edits in terms of like masking details and stuff like that, or I always keep saying I don't like doing local edits in terms of like just masking, just because um, I think it starts looking unnatural pretty quickly. Um, and my whole thing, and I just lost that image. I changed the tag and it moved it. Um, my whole thing is that, what was I talking about? I'm that easily distracted. It's actually kind of sad, incredible at the same time. But neutral canvas. So yeah, light, sharpness, like always get that as good as you can, and that just gives you room to play. Local edits, that's what I was talking about. So I mean, I can go in and add, so I had an empty layer. I should get my tablet out real fast. I hate drawing with a pencil. So I just have a Wacom, Wacom, depending who you talk to. I remember FI talking about Wacom, and I was always confused. Oh, wow. So I also reformatted my entire, did a clean install of the OS. I don't know if I have this. Oh, I do? Oh my God. Security settings. Sorry, hold please. Apparently the tablet needs security. There it is. Security and privacy, accessibility. Well, that's stupid. Fuck. So I'm sorry, I'm going through preferences. It's telling me to give my tablet access through accessibility, and I did. I already had. So that's fun. Camera setting? This is like, I have no idea why it's barking at me about this. Well, maybe I'm not going to use a tablet. Well, that'll be back there somewhere. But it's like the second you start, this is going to be ugly. So my mouse is not set up for this. Does it have? I guess there's no auto mask on this. I think there is, but I'm just being stupid. I mean, in general, I'd probably use a gradient for something like this, just because this is going to halo. Yeah, this is definitely going to halo. But, I mean, this is where you don't get into doing like, brightness is like, yeah, it's as far as I push it. But Well, actually, like, so if you up the brightness on the adjustment layer that's being applied here, then you can go down and start darkening the rest of it, which, oh, I don't know why this is being so fickle about this. Okay, maybe I just need to be more dramatic with this. Well, doing a very piss poor job of illustrating my point. This looks like dog shit. Usually I'd push the whites and the highlights. I don't know why this is being so fucking terrible. So, but the idea being that like you could bump this up and then you could just knock everything down. You could also do like a darkening but mask it out from here. That's probably the cleaner way of doing it instead of like trying to just bump that area while also simultaneously adjusting everything else. Let's go MTT. So if we go invert, I mean, this is going to be very crude. This is probably not even going to illustrate the point, so I should really just take an L on this and keep moving, which I'm going to do. Basically, like, to me, that, like, getting in that realm just doesn't feel natural. I do local edits on parameters of, like, color. I'll do it based on different values. Like, I'll start manipulating things by that. But as soon as it gets, like, by areas of the photos or picking out different elements, I think by masking, I think it just looks too pulled out and it doesn't look natural. I think if you do it by colors, I think there's like smooth natural gradations that happen between some of the shadows and the highlights. That where if you're manipulating the oranges, like there's a smooth curve that feels natural and kind of with kind of the image, so it doesn't feel like you're just like pasting this mask on top of everything else. Wonder, is it frozen? Jim, are you in a capture one also? Kind of curious how your experience is with it. I didn't know you were messing around with it. Oh, yeah, Wacom. Yeah, it was working pre-reinstall. Um, I don't know what the hell happened. It just, I don't know. Sorry, distracted. Should probably do some edits and not just do like really shitty examples of what I'm talking about, because I'm pretty sure no one fucking believes a word I'm saying right now. Can I start this? Oh, accessibility stuff. Yeah. I've been going back on so many different drivers. Like, I think I'm on, for a while, I was like using a 2-year-old driver just because it used to have an issue where it would stick on, I think it was mostly Photoshop, but I want to say it was everywhere. And it would just like start dragging shit. So you just click on something, like you want to click on a panel, and then you'd move somewhere else and it would just start dragging shit. Or you'd click in the layers panel and it would stick on a layer and then it would just drag it somewhere else in your file and it's fucking gone. It's like, rad. This is super, super fucking helpful. I think I just pasted this. That's not really good image as an example. Let's see. I had some thoughts on what I was going to go through beforehand, and they're all evaporated. Maybe I can. Oh, the hell, why not? There's a lot of Iceland pictures. I don't know if this is the right day or not, but I mean, anything in Iceland you can make dark, and it's better. Even going from stuff that's like from here, starting with like a pretty generic um, exposure. So I mean, everything's pretty sharp. Um, I don't know if I can get the histogram to reset to the original. Yeah, I guess I could. So I mean, it's pretty neutral. I'm probably shot it down a top, so that's why there's nothing too high, which is kind of how I like it. But from there, it's really just this one leaning into the color. I'm just gonna do one from scratch because I think it's really not helpful for me to just ramble about this shit. This goal, I'm not gonna. If you've been there, you know. Secret's out on Iceland. Um, but so the preset that I have always bumps up the exposure a little bit just to compensate for that stop. But so this is probably pretty true exposure at this point. I mean, histogram kind of reflects that. But immediately, well, I always get carried away. That's my problem. And I always end up paying for it later. But bringing the contrast down, bringing the brightness down is kind of step one. That gets you in the wheelhouse. White balance is also super important. So depending on like what sort of feel, I mean, when it's dark and rainy, you can't really fight too much to like lean into the cooler tones. I'll try something with this one that I've been seeing a bit more of, and I'm probably going to do a terrible job at it, but it can be a learning experience for everyone. This it almost looks like a long exposure. It's weird. So again, like nuking contrast, shadows become very powerful in these, just because that's sort of the range the whole image lives in the histogram. So this is where you start having to bounce back and forth. And again, with not having the idea of how this processes things, I've been meaning to do this. I've been meaning to move levels up, so I do it first. Because to me, like once you can start limiting those top level values, I think that starts creating a much better mood that I'm going for. Like these highlights, I'm trying not to kill them entirely because that just would flatten this out, but kind of narrowing, like nudging everything down to the darker end of the spectrum is um, definitely what I want to do. Kind of moving the midtones a bit darker. And this is where things can get sideways. So like you can see where like the shadows almost start getting lighter. And I see a lot of people get in trouble. Well, in my eyes, it looks like trouble because it's obvious. But again, everyone's got their own styles. I don't hate on anyone's styles. It's just not all for me. And I don't think this is like a technical aspect of it, but when you start like bringing your shadows up too high and limiting like how dark they can be, it just starts, you lose depth to the image, which you're kind of doing with the lack of contrast. So you've already kind of covered that off a little bit. This is more about like setting the overall feel and like literally like the limits of the levels that your pixels can operate within. So um, this is usually, I'll do some finagling here. And again, like there's other options for adjusting values when you get into the color balance. So it's always this kind of, it's basically a big tug of war match going on. And just kind of knowing what to look for, which probably isn't super helpful. What I look for is, well, one, what do I want people to get out of this? So for me, this image, I think scale is impressive, and I think just the overall feel of this is impressive. So again, composition also important. So for me, rule of thirds almost always. Um, I like that this intersects the bottom, and this is kind of just meanders off a little bit. Um, Something to be said about when it doesn't align. I think there's sometimes I like to not have it align, but I think this is one of the instances where it's not really not about creating visual tension through the layout. So I really want people to focus on this kind of line leading people here, this line kind of intersecting in the bottom corner, although it doesn't right now. Again, I had it. That's close enough. Where are we at? So yeah, so like knowing those are what I want people to take away from this. It's like, okay, how do I keep the focus on that, but also not lose kind of like the atmosphere of the moment? And I know that sounds super wankish to say, but I mean, really, they're like when you look at old pictures, there's always like an emotion associated with it, and I think that's basically what I'm striving for is to retain that and probably amplify it a little bit. Um, yeah, it just sounds like wank, but that's what I'm going for basically, and I think that's all cinematic coloring is really adding emotion by playing with color balance and color theory and all the associations our minds make with colors. Um, so again, this is where I'll start just feeling around. Like I dove into the curves a little bit. Curves is coming from Lightroom. Like that's almost where the point where I did all my coloration, or like, I mean, it would be coloration through the individual channels, but like creating the right moments of contrast, it was almost entirely through curves. Um, so even looking at this, I don't know, my eyes just got adjusted, but I mean, looking from where we came, it definitely feels bluer, but it doesn't feel overwhelmingly blue. So we can get into some of these shadows, and this is where make sure I don't inadvertently close the stream down. Not that anyone would shed a tear. Um, yeah, so I mean, sometimes happy accidents like this happen. I don't think this is right, but I think the way it kind of balances out the blues and the sort of neutrals is kind of fucking interesting to me. Um, and usually, almost everything with the color wheels is about taking it to 11 and then dialing it back. I think it's pretty common for people to do because it really gives you a sense of like the emotion and kind of what you're adding to it. Um, and so this is where, so depending on how dark you go, like where everything happens with the color balance, whether it's on the shadows or in the midtones. I'm trying to think how I can parallel this um, to Lightroom because there really isn't any comparable function. Everything there is like individual channels and curves. So I don't think there's any way to relate this outside of just talking about how colors applied throughout tonal range. So for me, like if I know I'm gonna do something that's a bit bluer or kind of colder in general, I'll sometimes take the shadows as a moment to offset it, just to kind of keep a neutral ground somewhere within it. And it's not always the shadows that make the most sense, but sometimes it is. And this is where it's like something that's constantly evolving. So kind of with and without. Like to me, like the little bit of red in here just kind of offsets the blue a little bit. Um, and something I've been getting into myself is like this idea of adding like yellowish and greens into what's kind of the highlights now. Um, it's definitely a dark feel, and I don't know what it is. Um, I've made like a weird association of green with kind of technical and cold. I don't know if that's like something from I don't even know. I would say it's like something with like the Matrix, but to me, like every time I think of like green tonality, I think of Fuji. I have no idea if that's even accurate, but that's where I have it in my head. And there's a certain coldness and um, I guess coldness, best way I'd put it. Um, Kind of associated with it, and it's something outside of blue and cold, but it's not. It's like tangential to blue and cold, but it's not blue. It's kind of this. I don't know, just different vibe. I'm just gonna leave it at that. Shut up. If someone wants to learn more about it, I'll do my homework and come back with something a little bit better than that. But even getting into the highlights and kind of offsetting it to more traditional blue kind of softens what is happening with this green here. Again, like I'm not even messing, I haven't messed with the midtones yet. So this is where you can really start just like bringing everything down. You don't want to bring everything down too much. There can be moments, even with dark images, where you really just, because the highlights not, it's really not hitting anything but the absolute brightest values. And that's not a lot. There's not going to be a lot of highlights in here. Like, I keep forgetting you can't see my cursor, but like in the white water of the waterfall, that's I'd be. I mean, again, fuck. I have to kind of like. I don't even think bigger cursor shows. Doesn't. Rad. Um, in the curves panel, when I hover over these areas, you can see like it is almost the bottom quarter of it. So how much is highlights really going to affect? And my answer would probably be not very much. So this is where you can kind of go ham on highlights. Catchy, I know. And really start just like pushing in on like weird colorations because it's really only hitting the top and it should be pretty soft in terms of how it's applied. And again, this is something that this is partially why I switched to Capture One, is to have another level of color control. And even on top of this, like I have a separate layer attached for like additional colors. So if I want to go and just start like fucking around with like, you know what, that's not quite right. I kind of want to add a little bit more on top of that. Um, like, oh, I think I want a little more blue. Like I can very easily like keep the base of what I had, but just add a blue tint to everything. And I think that's something that's worth a lot to me. Um, Especially when it comes to these darker edits where it's like you really need refined controls. Um, and that's just not something like Capture One, or not Capture One, Lightroom. Like I was in here, oh fuck, don't do that. I don't know what caused that. But I mean, I was in here adding like between, so if you're looking, I'm trying to make it flash. Is that going to show? Sorry, I'm just checking to see what you can see. Um, so like the bottom quarter, I would sometimes have like up to 8 points in there. And I'm literally moving each point by like 1 pixel, up, down, left, right, like. And so it got to a point where there were just like, I'd get weird banding on images just because I was literally um, unable to really control color in that sort of level. Like, and to me, it blows my mind that like, I believe Photoshop, I don't know. Everything I'm familiar with in Photoshop CS6, um, but you really couldn't expand the curves panel bigger, and that's what's good. I can, if I switch this over to show my full desktop. So I have this additional curves panel over here where I can just start adding in more and more points, which is super nice. That was also one of the biggest reasons why I switched. So it's additional color control and then larger curves panel. And you used to be able to make this as big as you wanted, and I don't know why, but they've limited the size. I have to think there's some performance issue, or they're trying to keep people like me from doing really stupid stuff. Because again, like I think like if I'm being totally honest with myself, getting in and doing those sort of manipulations at that level is probably um, a signifier of just a bad technique. Um, I'm pretty sure I'm either trying to do an edit I shouldn't, which again is kind of a stupid statement hearing that out loud because I don't think there's any way you should or shouldn't be able to do something like this. I do this shit because no one can tell me what the fuck to do and what's right and what's wrong. Although Lightroom imposes all sorts of things, and I was talking about this on my last stream, like some of the limitations and some of the pushing and pulling it does when you start making modifications to colors and values, I think it made for better coloring, to be entirely honest. Like I think I'm still working through how to cohesively modify my color balance in a way that feels cohesive. It kind of creates this odd color harmony or lack thereof on some of mine, and that can be good and bad. I think in some instances it's great because it does something unconventional, but in some instances it just doesn't look good. And I'll compare. I have a folder of old edits, and it is just like I kind of like the old edit I did 2 years ago versus the one I just did. But that's part of the deal, and that's where it's not always just like a straight line forward. I don't know if I'm 1,000% in on Capture One. About 99 right now. But we'll see. I think it may just mean me committing more time. But yeah, enough about that. Let's get this one done. Get this on the photo stream. So for comparison, let's put a tag to this. I want green also. Where'd it go? So this is where it's always kind of interesting to compare like where things are, just because I do these on such an individual basis. I don't think it's usually good or bad. I think this one's got a bit more softness to it, especially through here. I mean, it definitely gets darker, but I mean, I'm not really done with this one. It's just kind of a comparison. I think with this one too. This one I remember, like I always see this one and just kind of, I don't know, the coloration through here is something that is still kind of wild to me. That my eye just was like okay with that. I don't think I actually really like it. It's one of my favorite kind of color balances and like the way it kind of just fades out there, but just the colors that are going on are just pretty weird. And that's not an edible edit at all, but that's a different story. And so looking at this, like coming back to this, like to me, it still feels too bright through here. So maybe I'm doing a little bit too much, and I almost want to start knocking this down across the board. And so this is where you can kind of get into like this weird middle ground of, do you push everything dark and start to like pull things up? So if I start going like higher on the highlights, and then shadows, like this is really going to start affecting everything. And again, so this is where you can kind of see the shortcomings of like, they call it their high dynamic range sliders. I don't even know what the fuck that's about. But this is where I'll go into the curves panel and start like adding, because I think the shadows starts lifting everything collectively too much. Where I think I'd still like to keep things a little bit darker and then start pulling out additional stuff. And again, things can get weird quick with this approach. I mean, even like I'm moving this by like a pixel, and it's really having a strong effect on what's happening with the kind of the white water that's coming down the waterfall. And so like you don't want to have like too high of a contrast, because that's one of those things, like, is it important to see how like to have that contrast between the calmer water and the more turbulent water. And I would say no. Um, so this is where it's like just establishing and kind of keeping those things in mind of like what you want to convey: scale, waterfall, and mood, and the fact that there's people everywhere in Iceland, like fucking everywhere. It's crazy. So again, now I'm going back to the blacks because I think it felt too swamp down here, and to me, like there's even too much contrast in this. Like this almost feels, I don't know, feels oddly normal. Like this feels very kind of affected, and maybe that's just because it's in the fog. But um, yeah, dude, Jim, thanks for cruising by, man. Always can talk this kind of stuff forever. So, and anyone else, right now it says there's 0 people, which is probably likely. Um, questions, comments, anything. Like, it doesn't have to be dark photos. Like, that's, I'm still learning this shit and trying to find out what people care about. Maybe it's not this today. I don't know. I think I'm hoping to get to a point where I can just come in here and work and just more bullshit and like whatever people have questions on is what I can do versus like I'm going to have a focus. I'm just going to do dark photos. I think there's value to that in terms of having this as a DVR, but that's something else entirely. Um, my main thing with this is like to offer value. That's fucking it. Yeah, just having weird epiphanies about holding shit in versus giving back. Yeah, I won't go into that, but so now getting to like overall tone. So the master is really what brings everything together and kind of unites the different directions you start going with a 3-way color balance. And that's, you know, it's nice. I think there's ways of not really needing the master. And I've heard people use the master in different ways in terms of um, like what its real purpose is. I've heard people use it for color correction. I tend to think you can get the color correction good enough through just the white balance, but you can do it. I don't see why not. Again, I'm still working through the exact methods of like, should I use curves just for like starting it with color balance or color correction, and then using the color balance just because it's smoother, for the kind of stylistic edits? But I don't know, feeling that out still, and I always just go back and forth. Kind of what you're seeing now is basically the process I go through of like, oh, that's not good. Of just like always having something to ladder back to. Um, and like just understanding every decision. So anytime you modify a slider, like, why do I like it? Why do I not like it? And I think you don't have to know exactly what you're doing, but as long as you have these like tenets of like, I'm trying to make this dark, I'm trying to keep this in focus, I'm trying to convey this feeling, like every slider move will either help it or hurt it. And that's like, that's a big part of it. It's not like, I'm sure there's some people out there who can very technically approach this and just like make no extra moves on any sliders anywhere, and it's like, that's not me. I keep talking about this, or rambling, whatever it is. I can't be the judge of that. Of just like operating on feel, and it's like sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. It's not the most efficient, but I think it's, I don't know, it creates variability and it keeps it kind of, I guess, non-formulaic. I think I'm just scared of like copying and pasting things just because I don't think it doesn't suit you very much. Plus, there's just like you find new shit. Like when you start from scratch, like you find out like, oh shit, like greens in the midtones, like, hey, it kind of works, or like, nah, that shit fucking week. Like, let's not do that again. I don't know. Me saying let's, is that fourth person? I don't fucking know. But, and this is where like I'll never stop fucking around with it. I think there's something innately interesting about like the super blue midtones versus the greens. I think this is like more cohesive, considering the subject matter. I mean, I would almost. I think there's part of me that would want to go darker, but I mean, we're already pushing it. And you start losing saturation, then you can up it. But it's like, at what point do you stop helping? I guess. Where it's like, if you go too much in the brighter, I think this is too far. I could see this being okay, but I don't think it's not dark enough for my taste. And always something to think about is how people are going to be viewing it, where they're going to be viewing it. And like, you just can't push it too hard sometimes. As I'm going back on contrast again. But yeah, I think this is getting a decent spot. So for comparison, where it started, where it ends up. It's always funny. Like, I give people a lot of shit to go to Iceland and shoot. Because they always, I don't know, to me, they do shit that, like, I just don't get. And there are a lot of people with yellow rain jackets there, so it is a thing. That's one of them I give people shit for. But, like, people are scared of green. I don't know what it is. They make all their greens yellow. It's like they can't figure out a good way to balance green in their color grades. And I'll admit, it is harder. For sure. I was one who would just hit the greens. Just, no, it's more the yellows. Always the yellows on this. It's, well, you'll see more of like, I think it's too dark for me to really show it properly, but you know, it's like the teal and orange. So they'll get like the cold through the water, and then they'll get the orange through the grass, and it's like, that grass isn't fucking orange. It rains like 3/4 of the year. Like, pretty sure their grass isn't dead, but again, there's no wrong answers. Just, I have opinions. As I'm sure other people have opinions of my opinions in my work. So put this one in the screensaver. Dark, Terra, cold. Yeah. Develop. Like a green, dude. So let me check. So make sure I got my. So I'm going to add that one right now before I forget. So there's actually some tangible output from this. So that one and the one I posted on Instagram promoting this dark photos post are both now on the transfer incomplete. What are you talking about? What? This is odd. Well, I'll do that another time. I don't know what's going on. It'll be available soon. Ish. Let's see. Not the best one. There's no shot this is green. Then promo, home, this in promo. So this is one I think what's posted. Uh-oh. Is it frozen? Nope. Still going. Temperatures are still good. Right now it's at 40. I believe they said 70 to shut down, so it should never get there. I have a hard time believing it's temperature that's causing this, but yeah, so this is one I think I posted way back, but I never have re-edited it since coming over from Lightroom. I mean, I redid my whole catalog, but there's definitely some that got through the cracks. So, and see, this is bad habits. Like I just moved levels up, but I'm still skipping it first thing. I'm a slow learner. I fight myself on all this shit all the time. So I'm jumping down to the black just to kind of create some contrast because I've nuked the contrast here. I've made it darker. I've narrowed in the levels. So keeping like some instance of contrast, I think is important to see kind of what I'm working with. I can always come down to the levels and do it that way. To me, that's getting too contrasty in that kind of bottom quadrant. I haven't even touched color balance. Maybe a takeaway of this is like it's not really important the order you do it in. I try and do like white balance, levels, exposure, HDR, but that's not always the way it shakes out. And I think why I picked this one is that there's neutral tones through here, like keeping the grass or the gravel kind of this orangish color. I think is going to be a good offset to this darker tone. Like it's already getting lost, but I can already tell. Well, I guess it's more orange. Maybe not. Maybe there's no way of. Well, that means I've gone too far on the initial grid. If you can't recover it, like you've gone too far, and that's probably another thing I could go on about. But like how much to use the temperature in order to set the mood of an image. And I think when you start going too far into one side or the other, like it starts applying colors in weird ways. Like you might be adding the same amount of like blue tonality through different methods, but there's just weird instances where it just looks like it's too blue and it's too much of like a wholesale application of blue. Whereas to me, like this still feels kind of neutral. Like it's definitely on the bluer side, not by much. So I'm hovering in like over the gravel in the bottom, and I'm looking at the numbers up top, where it kind of breaks down what it's sampling at that exact point. And it's very neutral, actually, shockingly neutral. And there's actually less reds. Oh, there's more reds, less blues through there. So this is where it's like good to walk it back, and realize like, okay, I went too far. Like let's get this tonality and color from different methods. So overall, I mean, what I'm trying to achieve is just like keep them in focus and this path kind of meandering off into the oblivion, basically. It's hot springs, basically. So that's kind of what I'm going to keep in mind as I'm doing this. And to me, like that background cloud, like that, the contrast is important because it gives some context and settings and depth So you don't want to get rid of it entirely, but like where it was at, to me, this starts overpowering the subject matter at hand here. I wonder if I did a search 5291. What's crazy is I have 5 different, no, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different images with the exact same file names in different sessions, which is a problem. I need to figure that out. Trusty kombucha. Yes. Keep going with this one. So again, shadows, like dark edits, like it's gonna run away really fast. And this is one where it's like, I kind of want to like lean into the warmer tones in the shadows because that'll help keep some of this intact. I don't think it's necessarily this. But I think it's a start. And so this is one I think it's going to take a lot of bouncing around. Almost like the greenish blues. This is where you can also get into like different color theory and harmony and all that stuff in terms of like you apply greens in the shadows. It's like the teal and orange, like why that works so well is because they're complementary colors. Something to keep in mind, but and I think I do after kind of, but I don't really put a name or thought to it. I kind of trust my eye, and I guess I've gotten to a point where I kind of understand what works and what doesn't. Nothing. Get weird with these. I mean, with these, they make it really simple of like finding complementary colors. It's like just go across the color wheel. Like go across from cyan, like what do you get? You get orange. Across from purple, what do you get? You get green. Blue, yellow. Yellowish orange. No, it's orange. Jesus. So that's one way of kind of, if you want to check it, you can. But I think that can also be limiting sometimes. Because I think you'll find there's a lot of, I'm going to find, it's posts I've been seeing a ton of. Let's see if I can pull this up. Oh no. Oh, I do have it. What's his name? Oh, that's not it. Sorry, I'm just looking for a post. Pretty much everyone's reposted it. Yes. Just count it. See if I can get this. Yeah, this guy. I mean, he's always getting into unconventional color palettes. I think to me, he's like really pushing it hard lately. Like this one, all of his stuff blows up, I guess. But I think this one really, like, if you look at the highlight colors of like the strong green, I mean, it does offer a lot of color contrast from like the oranges to the midtones and the shadows. But once you kind of understand it, you can go about breaking it. I think that's true with everything. If like you you know it works, and you can stick to that all you want. But like, if you want to kind of get outside the bounds of that, like, all right, push it. Like, find out what works, what doesn't work, why does it work, why doesn't it work? Because if I'm sure if you go back far enough, this guy's probably gonna have some fairly conventional tonality. Like, compare this to like what we just looked at. Like, this is beautiful. The color grading on this is fucking great. Um, but it's not nearly as expressive and unique. Um, and again, this is no slight to any of this stuff. Like, this shit is fucking amazing. Like, the attention to detail, and I think this is like the arc that he went on of just like started probably pretty neutral, basic, and just started pushing. Like, maybe it started with like seeing brake lights on the grass at night and seeing like that kind of color contrast. Um, I mean, this shit comes from anywhere. And I'm not pretending to like know exactly how this guy did this, or what his arc was. I'm just looking at his work and kind of making very, very big leaps and trying to assume things. Just to kind of walk back, like how he got to where he is, because this guy's a huge inspiration. Um, some of the stuff looks a little staged to me, like this kind of stuff. I It feels like he just told someone to go walk out in that field. Just me. Can't tell a horse just to stand there. Like this, I don't like this. Like, why would the horse be white? It just stands out from the rest of the grade. Like, I don't. And this is again, I don't know how he looks back on this stuff and whether he feels like this to me is amazing. Um, but you can see like it starts just getting weirder and weirder, and it's fucking amazing. Like, it's his own thing. But yeah, I mean, this is where you can take it. This is where I'm not here yet. I don't feel comfortable doing this. Someday, I don't know if I want to push it this far ever. I don't think I'm ever this sort of saturated. Um, that's just one of the characteristics, but like pushing the colors to that point, um, I don't know. It's always something that's super interesting to me, and I really appreciate the people who go about it and just commit to it. Um, and I mean, like it. I have moments of it where like maybe I start pushing some of these to really extreme levels. That's like too overbearing. But it's like I like the reds and the shadows, so like maybe I just get carried away with it and I add different stylistic elements to it. And then I offset it with, I don't know, even more blue. I don't know. Like it's something I'm easing into, but no people that did that like really, it's not fucking easy, man. It is crazy that they got there. Like, just watch the arc of any person, and it's just wild to see kind of like the little steps in the evolution, and they compare like the start and the end, and it's just weird. Maybe not weird. It's awesome. Like, I just love seeing that. And then you see other people who just don't evolve, and that's okay too, man. Um, I can't on a personal level relate to people who just do one thing and call it good and just never question it. Like, to me, that's just like I can't wrap my head around that. It doesn't seem like, why are you doing it if you just want to go on autopilot and just kind of bang out the same thing all the time? Like, I don't know. It seems really weird to me, but each their own. And see, this is where it's like you go from like looking at stuff like that to what I'm doing right now, and it's just like, man, this stuff feels boring. I do think it needs. I mean, this could easily be achieved with like tossing a master on. But even the masters apply differently than the white balance, which is interesting. I think it's a more acceptable way of applying wholesale color. But again, like I'm still trying to like keep this intact, but I don't know. It's just it feels so. Oh, do we just go the other way and make this not a dark photo? Oh no, no, fucker. I'm gonna try and not quit on photos because a lot of times by now I would have left this. Been like, fuck it, like this is not my day. I'm gonna figure this out, and that's a reality sometimes of like you just don't have it today. See, I'm already flattening it out. It feels so boring. And I was looking for the other image because I think the initial edit was far more interesting than this. I don't. Sorry. Sometimes instances like these, I'll just make a duplicate and start over. I try not to keep duplicates too long, just because it's kind of useless in some ways. Because if it's like an old edit you're keeping for like posterity's sake, like who the fuck cares? Pretty sure nobody. Oh shit, I don't have the lightning and thunder on this one. I'm gonna scrap the stream. Yeah, I keep on trying to go back, like I can't. I don't know if I can go as dark as I want and kind of keep the interest of like scrapping so much of the high end and muting the low end. Saying it. Curious. I mean, maybe trying to keep that the gravel intact as orange is just not serving my end goal, basically. I mean, it seems to be compromising everything else trying to keep that intact. Although I don't really have a great answer for coloring this right now. I think I'll try and just lean into this one and just get weird and see where it goes. How fucking much I can get comfortable with it. Like this, yeah, I have to walk this back. And this is where it's not as easy as just like hammering values in certain places. Like it's far more fucking complex than that. So like those images, if you look at it, it's like, yeah, just make the fucking highlights green. Make the midtones orange. Boom. Like it's not that fucking simple. I hate to say it. There's so much you have to do in terms of like, because your base image has like all sorts of different values to it. Like, how do you get all of these to blend together? It's like, well, you can do selective coloring, you can do a lot of masking, you can do a lot of greasy techniques to do it, but there's a lot of work that gets it there. And once you go into like that stylistic realm, like I definitely have no issue with going nuts with local edits and masking and all that shit. Like, you're not trying to convey the feeling of a real moment. Like you're almost creating a composite. I have a lot of issues with people who try and pass off composites as photos. It's like all these people who put birds and God rays in their stuff. It's like, I don't know what that is, but it's not a photo. That didn't happen. At the same time, you could argue, like, when I start taking people out, like that moment with just these two people, like, I want to take these people out. They're barely there, but to me, like, I don't know. I could see why someone would say I'm kind of hypocritical about this, but I don't know. I don't give a fuck. That's how I sleep at night. I'm sleeping well too, actually. They're gone. Don't have to worry about them. This is where like I'm coming back to the curves panel. If you could see my fucking cursor. But I feel more at home in terms of modifying colors on the curves panel than I do anywhere else. I still don't like, I'm guessing like crazy when it comes to um, the color balance and how everything kind of nets out. But I feel like I can really have a lot of control when I do it this way, as I'm losing control. And that's the thing about curves, and I think that's what scares people so much about it, is like it runs away from you very, 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 very fucking quickly. Which is, I mean, it's a powerful tool. Like, you know what you're doing, you can get great shit out of it. If you don't, like, good luck. To me, this feels. Oh shit. Is this on here? Yes. Literally added all this contrast. I've been fighting it ever since. And back in color balance. And if you look at the, like, I hate to keep bringing back up the guy we're just looking at, whose name I can't remember. I have a terrible memory. It's really not as easy as like applying just global colors. Like, I can't say that enough. It is much more strategic application of colors. So let's compare. I think this one's closer. This is the second one. And to me, it still feels too late. haven't even touched the HSO yet. I'll lean into the blues. Still too bright. See, this looks like those old James Bond movies where they tried to film night scenes during the day and just like, I don't know if they were underexposing it or what the fuck they were doing. But yeah, it stops looking natural real quick. Even this, like it's still. Because again, this moment didn't have a ton of contrast. I'm just testing white balance. Tint. Because sometimes you'll be very surprised in terms of the results you get when you start just hammering these. It's like, I don't know where I started. It kind of resets your eye to just go back to things that you thought were good and just test it. Sometimes you just tweak it a little bit, sometimes you tweak it a lot. So right now, this is a select of those two. Do I think it's perfect? Not really. But it's getting there. And I don't know exactly what it needs, but this is like, I don't know, one of those things where like I don't have to rush it. I'm not feeling obligated to just bang out a bunch of stuff right now. If that ain't it, then I'll come back to it. There's a point in diminishing returns where you're just like spend forever just noodling things, and it's like this image right here. I think this is the most edited photo or most attempts at a photo I've ever taken. I think there were 13. There were like 13 variations in Lightroom. At the risk of making a total ass out of myself, I'm gonna try it. Maybe it'll go good. Go well. Good. Alright. I think what makes this hard. Sorry. Like this to me wants to be a dark image. Although I don't know if there's any blowouts. Oh fuck, what is it? That will be. Yeah, so there's almost blowouts in this, which, well, there are. I think that's within 10% is the setting right now, but let's try and make a overexposed image dark. And I think this is one where you can for sure get into a ton of trouble. Because you can tell when people just nuke or decimate the highlights. It just looks funky. And this is where the levels can do a decent job. It's not updating. It's generating a ton of previews right now. Because I reset all the previews When I initially thought this was capture one was the problem. Trying to render these images in 6K, the preview size not being big enough for the screen, Capture One told me to maximize the previews, which are like full res. So I have the full res image raw file and the full res preview, and it's just like taking up tons of fucking space. So I deleted all those and I have it re-rendering all of them, but it's almost done. It'll just be super slow. All right. But temperatures are good. The highest is 44 degrees Celsius, so I'm amazed this is still working. This is awesome. Just willed it up. Wait. Stuck now? Oh, okay. And this is like the shit I've been like just enduring of like these moments where it's like it might be frozen. It might not. So again, I'm trying to reduce contrast largely by pulling the blacks up, reducing contrast, making it darker, stopping it down. But you can see like you get into these like flat clouds looks and you still have these kind of highlights in here. And to me, those are dead giveaways of like over manipulation. And that maybe this one doesn't get redone. I don't know. But you can see kind of like the inverse. It doesn't really matter. But again, so nuking highlights, like it doesn't get you too much trouble on this one. Like last thing I want people to think of this is like a bright day. And at the same time, like you want to see the ship and all the details. Not all the details, but some of them. In fact, it's orange. Like the greens and the oranges together has made this an exceptionally tough image for me. With the blues, like I think the color palette is just really fucking strange. My usual reds and the deeper shadows, but again, like this is getting down to the bottom third of the histogram where curves, like every move's gonna be having a pretty big fucking effect. Shadow surprisingly doesn't have that much effect. This is where I caution again, like nuking the whites all the way down definitely helps, but yeah, like, it's not getting you that much for it. I think ultimately there's going to have to be different ways of doing it. So this should help. So just again, another way of doing this. So if your curve goes below 45 degrees, then you're reducing contrast. Anytime you have an instance where it's above that 45 degrees, you guess it, increasing contrast. And if you go below, you're making it darker. So any point, like this is the natural level for that point in the curve. Which actually doesn't like that path, but that's just because it made more contrast, but we can bring more contrast in. And this is one actually too where if you've got really strong colors associated with different elements, like the orange for the ship, I mean, you can jump ahead to selective color, I guess. I think most people probably use Lightroom still. We can kind of bring out the ship a little bit, so maybe you don't have to be as worried about like how much of the shadows you can see. Like if you can pull it out a little bit through the orange. And this is, again, just this one's going to be the ultimate tug of war. Neutrals. Start getting greens. Start going this way, you get like, I mean, down below, what's nice is you can see basically the color you're netting out. How it's applied is a little odd. You don't always kind of see it that way. Oh man, I hate nuking saturation, but I think the only just cause for doing it is when you're so destructive elsewhere. Where like really, like if you compare this to the original, like it's actually not far off. Just through reducing contrast will inadvertently reduce saturation a little bit. Do I think it looks a lot out of place right now? Yes. But I think knowing the fact that you can kind of rescue some of these shadows, sorry, just greasy fingers all over the place, is kind of nice. Because then it gives you a little bit more leeway to, I think, make this feel a little more natural. Like, see, these clouds are going south. This is like the forever fucking tug of war. And also at the same token, like the blues, like I don't think I really want these. And if I can, I mean, I think this just gets into like this weird realm. I just want to reduce contrast in the clouds. Like the less you see and think of them, the better, honestly. It's getting better, and I mean, what you can do, I don't do this a lot. Lightness. So you can't see the cursor. So I'm over in the color editor on the bottom on the left. I took a sample of the cloud right above the ship because that's the brightest point right now that I think is giving me a little pause about what's happening in the clouds. Sometimes you can get away with modifying it. It definitely helped a little bit. Is it fixing it? No, it's not. To me, like I think this doesn't look like a bright. Doesn't necessarily look like a bright day taken and just over processed. It's close though. And I think that's what I've ultimately struggled with this image. Is like, so if you just theoretically you can flatten the clouds out to that extent. But this is where you, like, this is fucking unadvised. Don't do this. Just ridicule me for doing it. Like this curve panel should give people a lot of pause. Which as fuck gives me a lot of pause. Get the fuck out of here. Or at least it gives me a lot of pause off of what I've learned to this point. Maybe I'm wrong with what I've learned to this point, but oh my god, this is so bad. Don't do it. Fuck. This is where I'm noodling like ever so slightly on all these areas. I'm gonna try something else. I I create, so there's RGB and a luminance. Right now I'm fucking around with the RGB, which I almost never touch. What happened? Why did that get so... This is where curiosity gets the better of me. It's like if I start applying colors, will it help unify it enough, any way, shape, or form to make it believable? And again, I'm ready to accept the answer that that is no, because I've struggled so much with this fucking thing. Should probably have my Lightroom available to poke around in for reference, like what I'm doing now versus what I did. Fuck off. Probably the yellow really does a lot. God, no, no. So it's interesting is like the greens are bringing out, it's adding, so it must be processing color balance first and then color editor on top of that. Because some of these color editor values, no, it must be elsewhere. Because the color balance is fucking with different values applied to the blues somehow, or that tonal range. And so as I move it in and out, it's getting more or less contrast. So those values are affecting the blues different amounts because there's different amount of blue pixels there. This is where like the inverted curves and all the heavy, this has to be here. Yeah. Because I'm adding so much blues, like it's reducing, there's more blues being added there. So that means this negative 100%, yeah, 100% saturation is going inverted, basically, just in terms of pure tonal values. Something that should be darker than the rest starts getting inverted. So this is where you, again, playing with fire. Like, I can't tell you enough to like, you're gonna do this, be very fucking careful when you do it. It will look bad more times than not. That's what I would say. But I think at the same time, like I'm gravitating towards this blue because I think it helps unify the clouds. And again, like in terms of color contrast, it's softening the clouds again. And I don't think there's anything wrong with going with like a blue tint, or not tint, blue temp, or like a colder temperature to this. Something about having the orange tones retained, but then having like an overall cooler, colder. I mean, this is Iceland on like a pretty cold day, kind of cloudy day. This is like the worst fucking conditions to shoot in. I hated that so much. I got skunked. Let's call it what it is. There's any different on this layer? It's not. This is where I'm adding another master on top. And see, we're getting into weird realms right now. Wonder. I don't think it's helping. I don't think this is gonna do. Oh shit. So that's the shadows. Bump that up, touch. That down a touch. It's also, oh no. What also had me before, oh god, had me before was like, this green panel just fucked with me, big time. Because when you start pulling color so much and you have something that's kind of organically living within it, you just get these weird kind of moments of contrast. I think it's too far. The idea is right, it's just too much. Yeah. It's nice to kind of just like really play around with it and see what you're modifying. And again, this is where it's tempting to just like go in and mess around with like local edits and just mask in the boat and just start doing edits to that. But I just think you'll see it too clearly. I really don't know why I picked this one to do it on a live stream, but you can learn from my struggles. Hopefully somewhat informative. No, this is not. I think the tonal curve is what is giving me pause. It feels too heavy. This is where I have a light on right now. I'm curious to see what happens if I turn it off. In the dark. Problem is now is like the side, my background's really fucking with how I'm looking at color. Yeah, whatever. I'll get used to it. But I think that's getting somewhere decent. But I mean, this is an entirely different kind of like cold or like dark edit from the other ones I was doing that were colder, kind of more traditional. I haven't even got into here much. This is where I have to use my bigger one that's not on screen, just because the modifications are going to be so. I'm moving a large one by like pixels. Like I moved it down, like you, like look at this shit. No good. Look at this shit. No good. Even now, like that doesn't look good. Like I've undone the edits I've done. So this is going back to the blues and going negative 100 saturation. Oh, it's the lightness coming up so much. Actually, it got pushed too far. See? Oh, need some saturation. Nope, too much. This is where it starts getting more expressive, just adding tons of color in the midtones. In some ways, that starts concealing some of the bullshit I've been trying to pull on this one. Whoops. And what helps too, I remember doing this before, like looking at this green panel, like it is very different from everything else. But there's no reason you can't make that slightly closer so it doesn't feel so out of place. Like what color that is basically a non-factor to anything in this. Like it doesn't fucking matter. It means nothing. It's no reflection of any importance of the original photo. So getting that something feels a little bit better, and it's really not the focus anyways. So less color contrast, maybe more like color harmony going on there. I don't know. Don't have to do that kind of shit. To me, like right now, this is all feeling like this looks like that James Bond shit I was telling you about before. It's like, look, it looks like a daytime photo made dark. I've seen some people get away with it by just like, this is that overdoing the bottom end of the levels, but it kind of conceals. It conceals shit in the name of in the name of style. Ah, fuck, I'm such an idiot. I think that's better. Still ain't it. Another free tip. Curves panel always starts with top left or top right and bottom left points. But when you have 2 points like this and you're modifying such a small area, where these endpoints are definitely matters. Think about like it's trying to smooth the curve between these points. And if it's trying to smooth something that like from here, like look how much that bows up above that line. So you're really affecting quite a lot based off of that. And one way to offset that is to just like bring it down a little bit. I mean, you're still gonna have like moments of it, but I mean, if it applies to an image that's a little bit broader in terms of the different value ranges, like you can find like a lot of stuff, like the highlights blowing out quickly if you try and bump this up. You can always combat it and like bring it down really quick like this, but the smoother your curves, the better. So this sort of like tight turnaround sometimes not ideal. The smoothest way to do it is to really just start bringing this down and then maybe bringing like a point in here to kind of flatten that out and minimize the impact that's having on, it's basically collateral damage at the end of the day. But yeah, something to always pay attention to. And this thing is fucking kicking my ass again. I don't know, man. It's just getting into that over-processed realm very quickly. And what's nice, and like the idea behind additional layers, like color adjustments, a lot of people who apply presets apply them to additional layers on top, and you can adjust the opacity on it. So that's why I initially did it. I never use it. But as I'm like going through like kind of heavy edits, I'm finding it nice to be able to have the additional layers. Kind of going for like knowing what I want to go for, knowing it ends up being kind of heavy handed, and then just walk it back with opacity. Doesn't always work. But yeah, I just don't. I tried. I think there's something. It's close-ish. I just can't reconcile these clouds. Just can't do it. Let's see. What's another Iceland session? Islands? This is actually sunny. Yeah, I don't know why I'm saying these names out loud, but whatever. It's Iceland. Now it's generating 557 previews. And so this is, to me, the worst lighting ever. Hate it so much. Because there's like bright moments, and it fucks up your ability to really easily push it dark. Because I think I'm going to run into the same problems with this as I did with the other one. Like I'm gonna be left with these like weird soft highlights that are just awful. And I'm being very dramatic about this because I can be. But that's kind of the reality of it. Like if you're trying to do landscape stuff, like just rains on your parade. So I marked this one red. I don't know why. This is red. So red is, I'll flag something red if I think it needs to be redone. And I think what happened is, so I put this on sometimes and I walk around, and it's not like a vanity thing, like, oh, I just want to see how good my pictures are. Like, I'm trying to find shit that bugs me about them and try and like with a eye that's totally calibrated to something else, coming in totally fresh and trying to see what's wrong with it. So there's been a long history of edits on this one. But yeah, I think so. I saw the TV from an angle, and I think it always increases greens in the shadows. I don't know why. And this one looked like it was all washed out with greens, and it's definitely higher in greens. It's also got red, so it's kind of balanced out. Blue's not so much the shadows, but then blue's through here. So, I mean, like looking at it now on this, pretty fond of color, but this ghosting is not what I'm into. So this is a negative clarity. I'm just seeing things. No, I'm not seeing things. Sorry, it's slow just doing the previews. Wait for it. It's got 243 out of 557. Just gonna check something real fast. Three ten out of 557. Anyone? Hey, a couple people here. Think it just jumps around. It says like there's 2 people here and then 0 and then knows how many, man. For anyone who's here, appreciate you being here. I know these are rough. I'm winging it. I've been trying to keep busy and work on like the production value of this. Good excuse to keep doing motion because that really hasn't been too affected. So yeah, that's what I don't know when I'm going to finish those. I've been trying to work on different music for it, composing stuff myself. Again, I'd love to play music in this. I have the whole no ISO noise playlist. But yeah, I don't. Again, I played 3 seconds of a clip with rain and thunder over it, and I still got flagged for a copyright claim. So that's how it goes. None of these are it, so let's try this again. This is another one that I've really struggled with too. I don't know what it is. So crop. This is some of the wildest shit. Although I'm sure for people who live there, it's not that wild. Yeah, it's just the wind blows so strong in Iceland, it just like water doesn't fall down, it goes back up. It's like those offshore winds. It's weird. This is like right next to a highway, and I have to think people saw it, but I think people were confused while I was standing next to the highway with a long lens out. And granted, this is like surrounded by some of the more popular waterfalls in Iceland. So no one's really looking at this. And I get really uncomfortable doing that. I don't know why. Working on it. Previews are still going, but it's not chugging too bad. So again, wanting this to be like dark, but like not being able to lose the details of this, because that's everything to the shot. Like without the visual information of what's going on with the waterfall, like this is just a rock cliff with some water. But seeing like how hard it's blowing up, because there's definitely others. I just don't think capture it nearly as well. This is the same one, yeah. It's like here, like it's blowing up there, so it's just literally just like standing there and shooting a ton of shots and waiting for the right sort of moment. And this one's not terrible. It's always hard to convey scale on this kind of stuff. This one's pretty good. I don't want to try it on a different image altogether, because I've done that same image so many times. Nope, not gonna do that. This needs to be levels. Entirely skipped over. See, this one might be. No, it's not pulling out. These Fucking dogs around here. Swear to God. Love dogs. Just these yappy dogs around here. These owners just let them bark forever. So we're going down almost 2 stops, and the clouds look right. So I don't know if the metering was fucked up on this or what happened. Because I'm really pulling the shadows way more than I should. I don't even know if this really qualifies as a dark edit at this point. I don't think it really does. I guess it kind of does in the sense that like you're really playing around with a narrow, like we're only using half the tonal values. Getting into how you color just dark images in general. You just guess. Yeah, so I'm grasping at straws on this. Isn't it? It's just not. If I have something from here. Do another sunset. This could be the last one. It's been 2 hours and change. Hopefully there's some value to this. And not totally a waste. Again, trying to stick to a theme for these, but I mean, I'm like a dog chasing traffic in more ways than one, so I'm easily distracted. So keeping me on task with this kind of stuff, like I'm trying to do it because I think people watching back will want to either watch it or not based on kind of what I'm doing, not just rambling around and bullshitting with people. But yeah, this is gonna evolve if I keep going. See how things go. So this horizon's crooked, usually is. That's too low. Nope, nope. Do it. Can do it. Hey, still got it. So even with sunsets, there's decisions to be made, like how blue some of this is. Like, do you want to keep it blue? It's kind of natural. Or do you want to just kind of go even more warm? I mean, you can see like those blues are still hanging around until you really start pushing it. But to me, like, this is just not, that's not it. It's almost like it's too much purple. And I used to go way too much on like the magenta purple side of the spectrum. I'm leaning more towards the green, which is getting me more like true yellow-ish in my sunsets, which is weird, but I like it. I think. I don't know. This is still one of the craziest sunsets I think I've ever seen. But not important. So to me, there's a feeling like surfing somewhere at sunset that I'm trying to capture, and I'm doing a really bad job right now. Again, get rid of all those extra points you don't need. If you're like me and have all these templates that help add all these points in to make it your life easier, don't really need them. This is where it's like it really is kind of very subtle in terms of like the noodling of like, are you messing around with the blacks in the high dynamic range? Are you messing around with the points? Do you even come over here to the shadows? To me, some of this stuff's getting like too dark. Like, to me, there should be a softness to this. Not like, I don't know what this is at. I mean, there's no pure black in this. See from the histogram, but I want to stay away from that. Because it's still like, sunsets are still kind of bright. Like, this is more like dusk-ish. Something kind of cool about teal and the midtones. The shadows like are still so purple. This is the quickest way to do it. It's like color balance. That's like, is that helping? Maybe. And look at the values on that up top, above the viewport. Those are. It always is wild. Like if you look at like the very specific instances of color, like how saturated and how bright some colors are. Like especially if you get into like you see like some of those more cinematic edits, how far people are pushing it. Like isolate that color, like take an eyedropper or whatever and sample the color that's in there. And it is fucking bananas. It's like some of it's like almost pure cyan. Or like I don't know. And some of it, like I love some of these edits. It's not I don't get there myself. And I don't think it's a problem, but it's just not where I'm at. So I don't think I want to get too far away from the kind of yellowish. Like if you go too orange, it's just like it loses its. I think it's a nicer color contrast if you keep yellows in the sunsets. I don't think people talk enough about color contrast. I think everyone thinks of contrast to the lens of value, but there's so much color contrast you can add or reduce with keeping the same values, more or less. See, what's sad to me is like this loses all of how rad that sunset is. So in some instances, that's a loss. I don't think it ruins it though. I think for me, it's like, I mean, the sun's down at this point. So the fact that it's dark doesn't really bother me. I think some of the lighter moments are nice. This is where I'll just test with like, did I make the right decision going dark? I mean, that's a definite no. This is feeling okay. But to me, like, this feels like there's enough contrast between here. There's enough saturation here. There's enough details in here. And this is something that it's just a battle with. Like, you experience all this rad stuff and you have all these sharp lenses. Again, I talked about this earlier. But just like letting go of some of that stuff. Does that stuff make it a more beautiful sunset? Undoubtedly. I mean, there's local edits, so I can really. Nope, I don't want that applied to. What? What? What is going on? This is where like no history in Capture One drives me nuts. Like I don't know what I'm undoing, redoing. Like I added a gradient and it was applied to the film highlights. I don't want it there. So I'm going back and it's like, what am I undoing? So maybe I lost some edits there. I don't, it's hard to tell, but so this is where, I mean, if you really feel uneasy about losing some of those details, I mean, you can see like how narrow those points are. And even on my bigger curves, like I don't like, nope, I got rid of it. Fuck. 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 Why are you deleting it? You're fucking kidding me. Get the fuck out of here. I hate this about Capture One so much. I mean, yeah, add texture in. You can add saturation in. It's like, yeah, you kind of have it. Maybe somewhere in the middle. This is where it was. That's with it blasting. At a point, it's like almost distracting. Yeah, you don't want to get in that game. Yeah, I'll just, I did it. People saw me do it. One person, I think. So, sunset. South Bay, dark, warm, surf. So, screensaver, Apple TV. If you haven't checked it out, please do. This will be in there as soon as I get my uploads working properly. I kind of fucked that up when I reformatted my computer, so. Boom. That one should be in there. So yeah, I'm gonna call it on that one. That's at least like a good first start. I mean, there's so many dark images and different variations of dark images. Um, whether you're forcing it or not. Oh, this could be. Is this where it finally fucks up? No, that's amazing. I was literally just about to think like, man, it's been amazing. This thing has just hummed along perfectly. Maybe it's fixed. Nope, not fucking fixed. So it is frozen. It is never gonna render. File transfers will screech to a halt. Temperatures are all fine. So I get to call them back tomorrow. Be like, hey guys, yeah, it's not the temperature. What else you got? Because everything else says this is fine. So yeah, none of these images will ever render. What a fucking shitty note to go out on. I was almost on a high, and then it was just like, no, shit's fucked. But at least we got something done. Actually, I want to check one thing. It's not the plugin. Frozen. Sometimes the JPEG Mini, if you haven't, check that out. That's a great way for optimizing your images. I don't know what the deleted process name is. Let's get rid of it. See what happens. Didn't fix it. Rad. Maybe it's time to play some Warzone or something. I'm not going to keep bitching about this because this is not something to keep bitching about. But hopefully that was helpful. I don't know when I'm going to be back. I'm not crazy about working under these parameters. I got a screenshot this temperature gauge. Yeah, hopefully it's enjoyable. I'm getting further with music production, so there might be a stream on that. I'm probably do one on Webflow and web design. I've gotten a lot of questions on that. So again, these streams like are super fucking awkward right now with me just basically talking to myself, whoever listens. Hopefully subscribers will grow. I've got some plans for releasing some individual videos that are non-streamed and more like very to the point, and not me just kind of bullshitting, rambling. And hopefully, like as maybe traction occurs or doesn't occur, I start doing more of the just super informal coming on here and just helping however I can, talking about whatever people want to hear instead of me trying to just decide and pretend like I can stay on task. So, yeah, blurry photos. It's my specialty right now. But otherwise, I don't know when I'll be back. Hopefully soon. But we'll see. Maybe this week. It all depends if I can get these drives fixed. There's so much hinging on that. So I'm just going to shut up about it. Yeah. Definitely leave any questions, comments, anything in the comments. And definitely subscribe because I'm going to stop blasting my channels. I don't like blasting my channels that I'm going live. To me, it's weird because they're not there for live. So, and I like things to grow organically on a merit. So through YouTube, if people like it, they'll tell someone, like it'll become a thing or it won't. And I'll just stop doing it. So hopefully I can keep doing this because I think this could turn into something fun. Especially like more of like a community sense around it and giving feedback. Like I think me talking about my process is helpful, but me like speaking to something specifically with someone else, like how it can help someone, like that's where I think my interest is right now. So, yeah, be back sometime.